Alright, got the edges all done. Now it's time for reinforcement. I've seen a whole lot of different ways people have done this. I have seen nothing. I have seen people put in fiberglass, which with that, you mix in the fiberglass with the concrete and you pour it in here. Well, when you polish it, those little fibers of fiberglass stick out through the top. And it just, you know, the people say it, you can feel it. So I don't do that. I've seen like the diamond lath like you use when you're stuccoing the side of a building or something. And that stuff, I mean, you can pull it, stretch it with your hands. And that, to me, doesn't seem like it adds really anything. Rebar, which you can get, I've seen big rebar, small rebar. I like this ladder wire, I guess you call it. It goes, when you're laying cinder block walls, you stretch it out across the cinder blocks and it holds it together. The reason I like this, it's relatively easy to work with. It's not too thick, it's rigid, and I like to put 2 layers of it. So you see I have some 1/2 inch little pieces of wood here. I put those in the bottom. I lay the ladder wire down on top of it. And then I take some of this wire and wire it up, and I'll put some screws in here and attach that wire to the screws to hold it up off the bottom. And then I'll put in a second layer about 1/2 inch from the bottom. So there's 2 layers of reinforcement. That way it doesn't matter which way the pressure is exerted on these. There's reinforcement in the concrete. Concrete compression strength is really high, tensile strength is really low. So depending on, you know, if you're making a bar or something, a breakfast bar, when it's hanging out, you know, over an edge by itself, your compression strength, it's going to be tension on the top, compression on the bottom. That, in that case, you would want your reinforcement at the top edge. If your pressure's in the middle, you'll want your reinforcement close to the bottom. Putting reinforcement in the middle of this, you know, this is 2 inches. If you did it 1 inch right in the middle, it really wouldn't do anything. So just to save from having to figure how this stuff is going to be supported by cabinetry or whatever, I'll put 2 layers of reinforcement. I've never had an issue. Mine have been in my house for years. They're not cracked. I don't really worry about that at all. So I'm just going to dive right into this. And you can cut it with a little pair of bolt cutters. You don't need saws or anything real heavy duty to go with it. Put a piece there. We'll go somewhere around close to the middle. These are just little ties. You get them in the concrete section of the home improvement store. A little twisting handle. Careful now. Don't know what you have to trim those off. I just like to get them out of the way. I'll bring that over here. What I try to do is get kind of the minimum amount in here to hold this thing together now. Pick this whole thing up out of this mold and work on it. Away from this so I don't risk scratching my surface or not getting it too dirty. And save that for a minute. This is the part I really don't like. I don't know why, I just don't. I'm gonna set that across there. Makes it a little easier to work. I'm just gonna do the same thing every place these overlap, and then I'm just gonna set this back down in there, and then I'll work on the top one. I got my reinforcement first layer all put together, and I just use these. A little bit of wire that I had the roll, I don't remember where it came from. Got some screws in the side here. And basically what I'm doing is just so I can take these little pieces of wood out, and this thing will just hang kind of right there close to where it is. Because if this thing touches the bottom of the mold and you start to polish and you see it come through, then you just had a bad day, because now the whole thing's ruined. You can start over again. So all I really want these to do is hold that reinforcement off the bottom of the mold so it doesn't touch a piece of wood. About it. And again, preparation for this thing is key, because once you make concrete, start pouring it, it's 2 ways to start fixing stuff. Have it get ready to go when you're ready to go. It makes it go a whole lot easier pouring concrete. And you'll see once I get the concrete in here, I'll come through and cut these off and mash them back down in the concrete, and they'll just stay in there. And I'll have to go through and vacuum this out again. But you can see that's suspended in there rather nicely. It's not touching anything on the bottom, which is exactly what I want. Now I'm going to make another one just like this, and I'm going to hang it much closer to the top. Well, there it is. That's about the last step I'm going to do before I pour the concrete. And I step down here and make sure you look across there that none of the reinforcement is sticking up. Of course, if it does, it's not the end of the world, because this will be the bottom of the countertop. But there, the wire's holding it all in place. I'm gonna work on the other ones, and we'll pour tomorrow when the silicone dries. See you then. All right. Next day, silicone's dry. Got all the reinforcements put in. Everything's leveled up. Got the wheel bucket ready, mixer ready. The additive and color. I think I got everything ready to go. So we're gonna start mixing some concrete. Got a brush pile going. Had some stuff from the yard we cleaned up a while ago. We had a storm come through. Cleaning up some of that mess. I like to load this thing with a bucket just makes it a little easier, seems like. If I recall correctly, when I was mixing the ones at my house, I was doing 2 ounces per bag, 2 bags. Ooh. Fire. And we're back. Try not to bring this stuff into it. I'm gonna try some plasticizer. I've never used it before. I never had it before, and I found it at Home Depot. I'm gonna see if it works. The more water you add, the weaker it gets. This stuff, you have to add a lot less water. Looks like it's doing pretty good. It says you can use one of these per bag. See how it goes. Make sure all the color, everything's mixing well. Looking good so far. Alright, I think I finally got it. Color looks good, consistency looks good. We're gonna try it and see. So far, I like the plasticizer. It didn't add much water, and that's gonna flow in nicely. And you want to be careful doing this. Watch your reinforcement and make sure they don't move on you. So pour it in rather easy. It's not making too much of a mess. Get a pretty healthy layer in there. Come here. Not too shabby. I'm gonna make 2 bags. I'm gonna get this. I figured about 2.5 or so. Get the corners good. Oh, 2 bags might get this. Work out pretty good. Turned out nicely. Except for my mess. I need that to stick to the floor. And instead of adding this, I'm gonna put that back in the mixer. Excuse me. That looks pretty good. I'm not even gonna bother trying to screed it. But I'm gonna mix up another batch. Batch number 2 about ready. Put me a tarp down this time. Yeah, try to cut those off just a little bit below the surface. You know, take the trowel and fill it back in. Just need a little bit. Well, the last one was fun. I had a batch left over from those. I put it in here and it looked like I needed another bag. So I mixed up another bag, and while mixing it, I started adding what was left, and I probably ought to mix 2 bags. No, I think it'd be okay. I finished up mixing one more bag, put it in here, and literally needed 2 more shovelfuls. Well, 3. So I had to mix another bag anyway, and now I have, you know, a paver or something made out in the yard. But they're all filled up with concrete, covered up so they don't dry out too fast. Now they'll sit here for, well, I got to go back to work tomorrow, so they'll sit here for till next week. I usually like to wait about 3 days before I even try to open them up. This one's going to get about 5 or 6 days. So the next one will be opening these things up and polishing them up.